Careblazer, if you have been on a confusing, emotionally draining, long journey trying to get a clear diagnosis for your loved one, this video is for you. And I want to say something right off the bat. You are not imagining this. The confusion is real. The difficulty is real. And the feeling that you're trying to fight in order to be believed, that you have to try to convince people about what you are seeing in your own home, that's real too. I hear from caregivers all the time things like, we went to 4 different doctors, got 4 different answers, or my loved one passed a memory test at the office, but every night seems super confused and can't remember basic details. Or the doctor said they think it might be Alzheimer's disease, but they can't really know for sure. If any of these sound familiar, then I want you to know you are definitely not alone. You are not failing. And unfortunately, this is a really common experience. Getting a confirmed diagnosis of any type of dementia is historically difficult. And the reason for that is not because the doctors aren't trying or that they don't care. It's because of how the disease lives in the brain. But here's what I want to share with you today. Something significant changed recently, and it's in particular how we come to an Alzheimer's diagnosis. So this is something every caregiver needs to know, especially if you suspect your loved one might have Alzheimer's disease. And it's about how the FDA recently approved a simple blood test that can confirm whether there are specific Alzheimer's markers in the body. So by the end of this video, I want to make sure you understand why it's been so hard to get an Alzheimer's diagnosis in particular, and what the new blood test actually is, how accurate it is, and most importantly, what it might mean for you and your loved one right now. First, let's just talk about what many caregivers go through when they're trying to get answers for what they are witnessing in their loved one. Maybe you noticed something was off. Maybe before you said anything to a doctor, years have gone by and we start thinking maybe something's off, but maybe they're just stressed. Maybe they just have a lot on their plate. Maybe they're not sleeping well. And then it starts to get more obvious. Maybe your loved one is repeating things more often than they ever have. Maybe you watch them struggle to search for a word that they've known their whole life. Or perhaps they struggle to do an activity or a hobby that they've always been really good at doing. So you eventually walk into a doctor's office, you explain what you've been witnessing, but your loved one, they're charming. They seem totally fine. They seem coherent for the 20 minutes they're right in front of the doctor. And the doctor kind of looks at you like, are you exaggerating? Are you being dramatic? This is probably just normal aging, nothing for you to worry about. Your loved one was able to answer the questions. They get a little check mark. Maybe they even made a little joke to the doctor, was able to put a couple sentences together. Everything looks pretty normal for their age. Let's just watch and wait. See you in 6 months to a year. And then we're left thinking, what in the world is going on? You drove home thinking, am I losing my mind? Am I being dramatic? Am I imagining all of this? Well, no, you weren't. Here's what was happening. The tools that doctors had to confirm whether Alzheimer's disease was present was limited. Expensive, invasive. Basically, they just had some cognitive testing and some questions to try to put together this puzzle piece. To definitively confirm the presence of amyloid plaque in the brain, which are one of the hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease, doctors either needed an expensive PET scan of the brain, or doctors needed an invasive spinal tap, where they basically draw fluid directly from the spinal cord. These are not easy procedures. They're not exactly things you can do quickly in a primary care visit. And they're also not things that insurance covers all of the time. So doctors did the best they could with what they had. They did some brain imaging, cognitive tests, asked questions, ruled out other causes, but many of them hesitated to say, hey, we think this is definitely Alzheimer's disease, because they genuinely could not prove that that was the case. So that meant that you and many caregivers like you are in limbo. And that can be an incredibly hard place to live in. You're making enormous decisions about driving, managing finances, living arrangements, financial planning, future treatment decisions, all of this without a clear answer. And I want you to know that difficulty is not your failure. It's basically a gap in the science. But that gap recently became a lot smaller. In May 2025, the very first blood test to help diagnose Alzheimer's disease received FDA approval. Now, what does this blood test actually look for? I want to explain this because I think understanding the why is just as important as knowing the what. Alzheimer's disease causes two types of protein problems in the brain. First, it causes something called amyloid plaques. These are sticky clumps between nerve cells that block the brain's communication pathways. And then there are something called tau tangles. These are twisted fibers that form inside brain cells and damage them from the inside out. Both of these disruptions begin building up years, sometimes decades, before any of the first symptoms of dementia even appear. Here's a way to picture it. Imagine a river, and let's say there's something toxic dumping into the river upstream, way up in the mountains. Well, eventually, traces of that material will flow downstream in the water toward the bottom. The problem is upstream, but the evidence travels. That's essentially what researchers discovered. As the proteins build up in the brain, they release traces in the bloodstream, and those traces can now be measured. So measuring the tau protein and also the beta amyloid plaques, the ratio of those two proteins in somebody's blood turns out to be a pretty highly accurate indicator of whether Alzheimer's related changes are happening in the brain. Here are some of the numbers. In clinical studies, when the blood test came back positive, over 91% of people were confirmed to have amyloid plaques through brain imaging. And when it came back negative, over 97% had no plaque confirmed when their brains were imaged. So these aren't perfect numbers, no test ever is, but they're far better than what was available before. So what this means for you at home is this. For the first time, a primary care doctor can order a simple blood draw, the same kind you would get when you get your cholesterol checked or you're getting a vitamin panel done, and you can get back meaningful information about what might be happening in your loved one's brain. Researchers are also publishing new work this year in 2026, reporting that the tests like these can detect biological signs of Alzheimer's disease 3 to 4 years before any symptoms begin to appear. 3 to 4 years. That's an enormous window that did not exist before. The only way we were ever getting any diagnosis of any type of dementia was after the symptoms were present. So inside the private conversations I have had with many dementia caregivers, one of the most common things I hear is something like, I wish we would have known sooner. And now this blood test is one way to start getting answers as soon as possible. So what does this mean practically for you and your loved one? Let's walk through some concrete things. Number one, if you are still trying to get a clear diagnosis for your loved one, you can now ask your doctor for a blood-based biomarker test. Specifically, you can ask about these biomarker tests for Alzheimer's disease. Your doctor might not bring up these tests on their own because it's still relatively new. It's still rolling out across the country. Primary care awareness is still catching up, but you can ask for it and you can say, hey, I've heard there's now blood tests that can detect Alzheimer's markers. Is that something we could explore? Number two, and this is so very important, understand that this blood test is just one piece of still a larger evaluation. It's not a standalone diagnosis. Even a positive test still needs to be confirmed with cognitive testing, a clinical interview, understanding your loved one's current functioning, their history, and of course, clinical judgment. But having this blood test is a powerful piece to the puzzle that simply did not exist before. Again, somebody can have a positive blood test, but still not meet criteria for the dementia diagnosis if they are still functioning okay. So it'll be something that the doctor will continue to monitor with time. Having a positive test doesn't automatically mean they have dementia. Number three, for those of you who are early in the journey, watching a parent or a spouse or a loved one, whether wondering what you're seeing is just normal aging or something more, a test like this can help give you answers that you would have had to wait years and years and many appointments to try to have answered the way that things have been in the past. This is important because earlier diagnosis means that your loved one could qualify for some of the treatments that are only available for people in the earlier stages. It also means it gives us more time to plan for the future, put together important documents, and do so while your loved one is still able to participate in all of those conversations and those big decisions. Number four, this can just be somewhat of a relief to family members to have the results. Not that they are hoping that their loved one has a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease, but just putting a label on what they're witnessing in their home, that they are not just imagining this. So that relief is allowed. It's actually quite normal. Family members like having something that they can go research and look up and understand, this is why my loved one is saying these things or doing these things. Now, I want to be honest with you with what can make this harder, because we deserve the full picture. First, access is not yet equal. These tests are new. They're not in every doctor's office right now. Insurance coverage is still evolving, in many cases still incomplete. This is an ongoing conversation between the medical world and the policy world. It's probably going to take some time, probably way too much time, for these tools to reach everybody who needs them. It's frustrating. It's genuinely unfair, especially for caregivers who are already waiting years for answers. Second, sometimes getting a confirmed diagnosis opens a door to grief, a grief that maybe they weren't ready to fully walk through. I've sometimes had Careblazers tell me, I fought so hard to figure out what was going on with my loved one, but once I actually heard the words Alzheimer's disease, it felt like my world fell apart. It makes complete sense. This can be something really hard and heartbreaking to hear, and that's just something to be aware of. Number three, this question I hear so often, and it's, does an official diagnosis actually change anything at all? Their loved one is going to need care regardless. At this time that I am recording this video, we do not have any cure for dementia. And my answer is yes, it does matter. A diagnosis can open doors to FDA approved treatments that may be able to slow the progression of the disease, help with the symptoms of the disease. All of these treatments are better for people when it is caught early on versus later on in the disease. As the disease progresses, it can help get financial paper in order. It can help make sure we're thinking about the future, doing whatever we can to protect our assets. That being said, you would want to be careful if you are thinking about a long-term care insurance policy and you don't have one yet. You might want to think about getting something like that before you pursued any of this testing. That's true whether it's the blood test or even cognitive testing. Careblazer, I want to close with this. For years, family members have been sitting in waiting rooms and in doctors' offices describing what they have been witnessing in their own homes, the changes they have been seeing in their loved ones, only to be met with, let's monitor this, or this is probably just normal aging, or I'm not quite sure. This blood test does not undo all of that. That's an incredibly painful, heartbreaking, hard process for both you and your loved one with dementia. Understanding the science doesn't erase the pain, but I hope it can help you maybe stop second guessing yourself or blaming yourself or feeling guilty for not knowing sooner, not getting a diagnosis sooner, not having the answer sooner. It just wasn't available sooner. In many cases, it's still not available. This is, again, a gap in the science, and it's not so easy to get a diagnosis with the tools that we have available. I hope this answered some of your questions you might have about the blood test for Alzheimer's disease in particular. If you are interested in more information like this, but definitely also more information on how to manage the emotional toll, the overwhelm, the frustration, the resentment, the grief, the guilt, I hope that you have signed up for our weekly newsletter. It's called the Dementia Dose. I write it personally every single week, and I send it to you for free, delivered straight to your inbox. There is a link below in the description, or you can go to our website at www.careblazers.com. Careblazer, I'm sending you so much love. Thank you for doing what you are doing for your loved one with dementia. Bye.
Also, Nico gets a belly rub for every person who subscribes from this video. So if you haven't already, click the red subscribe button. It's totally free, and Nico says thank you very much.